Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today I'll be going over the brand new melee weapon that came out with Araxia, the Spinnerex. But before we go into the build, let's go over our commenter board here. So the first and top commenter of the last video was the same person, it's Silver44. And then we have our recent supporter board here of Whoop-De-Wham, Nice Bear, and Colonel Suro 6. Thank you so much for your support. Unique and interesting things about the Spinnerex is that it comes with innate toxic on it already. And it also has this unique trait here where on death, enemies have a 10% chance to burst for each stack of toxin status effect applied to them, spreading toxic damage. So it's going to do kind of like a toxic explosion when it kills enemies. And in fact, as long as the Spinnerex did damage to that enemy can be killed by any source and it's still going to do that toxic explosion. I also want to point to a stat on the Spinnerex that's a little bit unimpressive, but we're gonna do some things about this. If we look at the Spinnerex's base critical chance, it's only 16%. So not a really good critical chance to work with. Now, luckily, there is an arcane that is really good for melee weapons that have bad critical chance, and it's called Melee Duplicate. And so a lot of our build is going to be revolving around using Melee Duplicate. Okay, now I want to go over Melee Duplicate a little bit, because this is an arcane that is very misunderstood by a lot of people. So let's read it here. On a base critical hit, 100% chance for your attack to strike a second time. A lot of people, they just read this as, well, if I do a crit, I'm going to attack 2 times. And that's not the case. There's a key word here where it is on a base critical hit. What is a base critical hit? It's a yellow crit. So this will not happen. You won't attack a second time if it's an orange or a red crit. You won't attack a second time if it's a white non-critical. It has to be a yellow base critical. And so there is a magic number for Melee Duplicate that you're really trying to get as close as humanly possible to, and that's 100% critical chance. Because that 100% critical chance, you are going to produce a yellow crit 100% of the time. If you're under 100%, you have a small chance to produce a white. If you're over 100%, you have a small chance to produce an orange. Both of those we don't want. We want to try to be as close to that 100% as possible. That way we get double hits all the time. And these double hits actually just straight up act as another hit. And so they will, trigger status effects on their own. They just act like you're hitting a second time. So anything that would normally happen on a hit, they can happen twice. So I ended up doing the math for you guys, and we have a build that is as close to 100% as I could get. And that's going to be 104% critical chance. So that is going to be only a 4% chance to produce an orange crit instead of a yellow. Otherwise, 96% of your hits are going to be yellow crits, and that will trigger Melee Duplicate. And let's go over the numbers here. So remember, this is a 16% base critical chance. So remember, we have 16. Blood Rush is 440% critical chance, which when you do 4.4 times 16, that means it is 70.4. Okay, so we're gonna do 70.4 plus the base of 16. And now we have to also factor in galvanized steel, which is 110% critical chance. You do 1.1 times 16 equals 17.6. And so we do 17.6 plus 16 plus 70.4, and that equals 104% critical chance. So this is as close as we can get here to the perfect Melee Duplicate build for the Spinnerex. Alrighty, we can finally go over the mods here. So in the first slot, I have Primed Fever Strike. The reason I add a toxic mod when we already have innate toxin on the weapon itself is because elements are factored in slightly differently in the damage equation. And so it's always good to have like at least some element on your build because you just end up getting more damage out of it anyway. And I felt like the innate toxic wasn't really enough. I just kind of wanted to give it a larger element number for it to work a little bit better in that damage equation. And so that's why I went with Prime Fever Strike here. In the next slot, we have Galvanized Steel, which is 110% critical chance and 120% critical damage. Organ Shatter is 90% critical damage. Galvanized Elementalist is plus 80% status damage and 120% status chance. Condition Overload is 80% melee damage per unique element affecting the target. Berserker Fury is 70% melee speed, or attack speed, I should say, sorry. Blood Rush is 440% critical chance. Weeping Wounds is 440% status chance. In the stance slot, we have 2 options here. We have Coiling Viper and Burning Wasp. I brought up the average damage per second numbers of both Coiling Viper and Burning Wasp, and Coiling Viper is pretty much better in every case. And also when it comes to like forced slash procs that a lot of people care about, neither of these produce forced slash procs unless it's the heavy attack, and they both share the same heavy attack. So since Coiling Viper, its combos were much better than Burning Wasp, and they share the same heavy attack, it really just makes more sense to go Coiling Viper in this case here. In the Tennokai slot, you have two options for like a max DPS setup. You have Disciple's Merit, which is gonna allow you to Tennokai anytime you do 4 melee hits, so it's very consistent. You almost like can expect when that Tennokai is gonna come up. And then you have Dreamer's Wrath, which is another top DPS Tennokai mod. So this is going to let you Tennokai more often, probably not as often as Disciple's Merit, but pretty close. But this keeps its kind of like RNG, you know, it's not going to be as consistent where your Tennokai comes up as Disciple's Merit, but when it does come up, you get 50% more critical damage to your Tennokais. So that's really up to you with Disciple's Merit or Dreamer's Wrath for the max DPS Tennokai mod. The other one I always point to is Opportunity's Reach, and this is really good if you're like me, you're an older person that maybe has bad reflexes, you frequently press your Tennokai button too late, and you know you screw up your whole combo because of it. And that's where Opportunity's Reach comes in. Are you an old man that has bad reflexes? Put Opportunity's Reach on here. So this gives you a whole 4 seconds to press your Tennokai button instead of it like disappearing really quickly. Not only that, but it also gives you some extra range on your Tennokai, which is nice. But I think the biggest thing about this is that 4-second window you have. So, you know, max DPS, go Disciple's Merit or Dreamer's Wrath. But if you're a old man with bad reflexes, go Opportunity's Reach. And then the Arcane slot, we're gonna be going for Melee Duplicate. I kind of explained this already. This is the one where you're gonna wanna try to get to as close to 100% critical chance as possible. And again, our build gets to 104% critical chance. And if you ever get a teammate that comes into your group and gives you more critical chance, make sure you yell at them. No, I'm kidding, don't do that. But yeah, that could happen. This is how you build out the brand new melee weapon, the Spinnerex. I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing for future content. So now we'll have a 5-minute gameplay portion showcasing the weapon, and when that's done, we'll come back to the orbiter and we'll kind of give our final thoughts on it. So I'll see you guys again after the gameplay. Alrighty, we're about to start the gameplay portion up here. Let's go ahead and hack this terminal. Now, when I do ranged weapons, I don't use any externals. That way you can just see how the weapon performs by itself. But when I do a melee weapon, I do use one external, and that's going to be a pet that primes for me. And it's because pretty much every melee build, maybe except for Glaives, will use a mod called Condition Overload. And Condition Overload, for it to actually function, requires you to be priming. So that's the only external I use when I do a melee build, is that I'll take a little pet in with me to prime. So I have my little Dirija here. Now, because this is not a influence build, I'm going to assume that it's going to be getting a lower kill per minute value than like an influence build gets. But it should have a better single target than influence, because influence is more of a like an AoE trash killer than like exposure or duplicate builds. So, you know, you trade one thing for something else. You get kind of like a mini influence effect with the toxin though, like where enemies explode in toxin damage. So you kind of get like a, you know, like a mini weird side grade to influence. I'm not a huge fan of whip movesets though. I wish there was maybe like a more fluid moveset for whips, is my only thing. Especially on Coiling Viper, because like it's a lot better than Burning Wasp. There's a lot of stop and go to the movement, unfortunately. I end up adding a lot of slide attacks in because, you know, it increases my forward momentum at least. The only attack you don't want to be doing on Coiled Viper, I have it written in front of me here. What is it here? The forward block. You don't want to be doing the forward block. It's the lower, or it's the lowest of the DPS compared to all of its other combos. Oh, the other combos are fine though. If you want to do the forward light, the neutral light, the neutral block, that's fine. Just don't do the forward block because it does have a much lower DPS than the others. I'm mostly just using the forward light here. We have the Acolyte coming. Let's see how it does against him. Should pretty much be a like a one-hitter. Most melee weapons are, to be fair. Oh, two-hitter. Oh my goodness. That was close to being a one-hitter. He had like a sliver of health after that hit. That probably could have been a one-hitter. Maybe I just like rolled low for my damage or something. I don't know. Roll a nat one. So we got 1 more minute left. I think you guys kind of get the gist of this weapon. It functions like a lot of other melee weapons. It's interesting that it's finally not an influence build, right? Every weapon is friggin' using influence nowadays because it's so strong. I guess you could technically make an influence build with this, but it would be annoying because like the toxic would try to mix, and then you would have to, yeah, you'd have to do some janky stuff to make an influence build. So it doesn't make sense to go influence. It makes more sense to just go pure toxin like we have here, and then go duplicate. And duplicate works beautifully on this because of the low crit chance. So we're almost at 5 minutes. We'll kill the Thraxes when they come, just to see how it does against like big targets. Why do I still use the wrap lamp? I suck at aiming it. I should use the one you don't have to aim. What is it? Kimura? I like the wrap lamp because it has some range to it, but man, my aim sucks with it. So that's 5 minutes in. We're at 418 kills. So, you know, right off the bat, you're going to notice that, yeah, it doesn't have the kill per minute of an influence build. Like if we were influence, we'd probably be at like 600 kills with any other weapon. Maybe even more possibly. This being at 418, so definitely less kill per minute, but you know, single target, probably a bit better than most influence builds. So, all right, let's go back to the Orbiter here. Welcome back to the Orbiter, guys. So I want to give my final thoughts on where I think the Spinnerex stacks up against other melee weapons. So it has the really cool thing where it really pushes you towards making a different kind of build with melee duplicate, which is refreshing since like every melee weapon in the friggin' game right now, well, almost everyone is going for melee influence. But it's because melee influence is so ridiculously overpowered. You're basically nuking the map just because you have that arcane on, that it really makes it hard for any non-melee influence build to even compete. And so, yeah, stacking this weapon with duplicate up against like any weapon with influence, it's probably not going to be that great. I would say the single target is probably a little bit better on this weapon, especially the further you go into Steel Path, when enemies can live longer and those toxin procs can actually get a few seconds to tick a few times. I think the single target on this could definitely beat out a melee influence build. But again, just in general, I think it's hard to have a non-influence weapon beat influence weapons, unfortunately. It's just kind of the state of the game where melee influence is a little bit too powerful right now. So that's my take. Tell me what you guys think. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right, bye.